Welcome to Midpointe. We recently did our series, Till Death Do Us Part, a reflection on the institution of marriage. We received lots of feedback, thoughtful, and sparked meaningful conversations around themes such as trust, exclusivity, infidelity, and the shared economy of a household. These topics all deserve deeper exploration, and today we begin with a closer look at monogamy, the ideal versus the reality. Joining me is Steve Wolf from Turning Towards Essence Counseling. Steve is a registered counselor. He describes counseling as a space to hold life's difficult experiences. By turning towards these challenges and expressing the deeper longings they carry within a therapeutic environment, new and more expansive possibilities can emerge and help people heal. So, welcome to our studios, Steve. And let us maybe perhaps start with how has monogamy evolved over the years, or what is the concept even meaning in modern times?
Oh boy, it's a tough question to start off with. Thank you for having me on and giving me the opportunity to reach people. I know this is a topic that is close to a lot of people's hearts, and a lot of people suffer. You know, they suffer in relationships. Should I stay or should I go? I didn't know I was getting into this. Is he cheating? Is she cheating? What did she really mean by that? So there's lots of things that go unsaid in a relationship. One of those is really, you know, in this lead question, you're really kind of getting right to it what is monogamy? And the truth of it is it means something different to everyone. I'm working with a couple right now that they're engaged. They're not married yet, but the wife discovered that the husband he looks at porn. Now she regards this as cheating, and he does not. So it's an issue that I don't know that I'm the authority on. But I don't know that I need to be the authority. I need to be the authority on getting at the intimacy between the two of them. In what ways does he feel like his privacy is going to be infringed on? And to what degree does she feel like she doesn't know if she can trust him or not, that he's only looking at her?
This actually raises a very interesting question, even about what cheating can mean to different people, or what exclusivity means for different people. Can we talk a little bit about that, perhaps? Like, you know, watching porn, is that damaging an exclusive relationship?
That's a great question. And to what degree is it damaging is another one. And couples will have different points of view on such a thing. But part of being a couple means, how do we integrate this in a way that feels like this is us? That I don't have to be anyone that I'm not, that you don't have to be anyone that you're not, but that there's some kind of a meeting of mutual respect between the two of us.
Do you feel that, how our systems are set up right from the get-go, that there is, we've been told the story that, once you're with someone, you owe some sort of a loyalty to each other, and have couples been able to explore what that really means even prior to committing to each other in an exclusive relationship?
It's tricky because, you change so much. Who you marry when you're 20 or 25, that's not the same person that you are when you're 30. Or when you're 40. And if you're not the same and you can't expect it to be the same, you can't really expect it for someone else. So there's some flexibility, I think, that could be built into things. And, not every couple that comes to me because they want to stay married. Some couples come because they don't know. They're not sure.
For today's topic, we are kind of focusing on this, you owe me this loyalty, right? Or you owe this exclusive relationship. And maybe let's get into what that can look like. What does cheating mean for people, or what does infidelity mean for people? And why do people go in that direction?
Boy, it's a really tricky question to ask the why question, because it's so different, in different couples that I've worked with, about what constitutes cheating. One couple that I worked with comes to mind where they'd been married for a while. They were young. They got married when they were young, and I think maybe in some ways they got bored with each other. I think maybe the resentment built up on them. And by the time they came to my office, it was an issue that had already come to a head, because they had some friends that they did a lot of stuff with. And the wife remarked about how much he seemed like he wanted to do things because he was more interested in the other woman than he was in her. So she felt like there was this ongoing emotional affair that the two of them were having, although they didn't do anything, as far as she knew, as far as he admitted. They hadn't kissed, they hadn't touched each other, they hadn't done anything. But it made her uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. It definitely made her uncomfortable. And, then the question comes, well, if then she had a physical relationship then with that woman's husband, who they were friends with, which one was cheating, and which instance was more egregious? That's not, obviously the thing that was more egregious is the one that happened to you. That's kind of how these things go, right?
So it is almost like this anxious attachment people have, and then people are expecting loyalty in all aspects of that attachment. Is that, I'm sure there are people who are actually able to live that too, and kudos to them. But is that realistic for a majority of relationships over the long haul? I think in short periods, of course, people are quite capable of being very, very committed. But in the long haul, what does it mean for people?
What does it mean for people to be in a committed relationship?
Or the expectation, I guess. Like, what does it mean for the expectation that you are so committed to me that in all ways, whether it's emotional attachment or physical intimacy, that I cannot see you putting anyone else above me, even if it is for a short time in a certain setting, from the example that you're giving?
Yeah, it's really tricky, because a lot of it is about trust. Because if you make a commitment, let's say, for instance, you said we're going to have this meeting at 11 o'clock, and I don't show up until 11:20 or 11:30. Now, if it's just one time, you might be okay with that. But if we're going to do a whole series or something, and I didn't make it to the first one on time, and then the second one I canceled at the last minute, and then I made it difficult, and my schedule is so busy, and I can't seem to get you in anyway. At some point, you're going to start to feel like you can't trust me.
This particular relationship of a couple, like whether you're married or just in a committed relationship. So the culture has taught us that this is the top of the totem pole. This relationship is where you belong. This is where you are committed to each other. So is this the highest form of commitment people are expecting? Because with friends, with siblings, with parents, you learn to accept that they love a variety, they have emotional attachment in a variety of ways to your other siblings. And this particular relationship has a very different set of expectations.
It does have a completely different set of expectations. And, to your point, oftentimes inaccurate, and people come with different ideas, and your ideas change. Well, I didn't know he was going to be like this when we got married.
It's the shift which people can't accept. Right?
It's the shift that they can't accept, or maybe the person that they were presented with in the first 6 months of the marriage doesn't feel like the same person that you're married to after 6 years. so you're wondering, what did I really commit to, and how much do I really owe the other person if I don't feel like I can count on them? And can we have a dialogue about these kinds of things? Can we have a mutual dialogue about these kinds of things? Because oftentimes, if you can't, then you really have no option but to cheat. Not that you have no option, but it becomes more palatable. It becomes more attractive. I saw an interview with a researcher at the University of Berkeley named Paul Pith, and he was doing this research on greed. And one of the things that he did is he was questioning, like, are people that have more money, are they greedier? Are they more selfish? And one of the things that he did in order to figure out this game is he let people play a game of Monopoly in his office, and they would record the game of Monopoly to see what happened. And then at some point, the game would become stacked, where it was obvious that one person was going to win. And when it became obvious that one person was going to win, it became more and more likely that the other person wouldn't have so many qualms about cheating as they did when the game has just been started freshly.
So it's a progression.
It's a progression, and it's a progression where one can become more insulary as it goes. If I'm having a difficulty with my spouse and I say something to him or her that I don't feel like is received, or is received with some compassion, or maybe they criticize me even just for asking the question, I may start to feel shut down. I may feel like bringing this conversation to my partner is no longer safe. What can I do? What can I do about it? Because I know how they're going to react. I can go and talk with my friends about it. And that kind of triangulation can happen. It depends on how I go to my friends and what the intent of it is.
I mean, not to profile any people, but when you talk about if the rich can get greedier, is it more men? Like, is cheating or infidelity more precipitated by men than women? Is there a gender difference here?
I've heard this question asked before. And one of the responses that I've gotten, from other people that have researched this is it's hard to know, because people don't always report the truth when they're reporting. Like, oh gosh, I guess I never cheated on anyone. Oh well, I kind of forgot about that one time when. So your memory works against you, especially if you're being asked by someone professional. So there's been a lot of speculation about who cheats and how much, and there's also been evidence that has suggested that it's different at different ages. When you're younger, I believe it was women were cheating more often than men, but as people aged, it was the men that were cheating more than the women.
Is there any specific reason for that in the research?
I don't know. I mean, not that I have seen. I mean, there's a whole lot of speculation again, and it's tricky because each person's situation is different, and the taboos around monogamy and cheating, I think, kind of fail to look at the bigger picture. People have done research on this again in ethical decision making. I think it was Kohlberg that was looking into this, and some of his predecessors looked into this as well. And they said people do things for different reasons, and so it's a developmental model. Because if you ask someone is cheating right or wrong, you get a different answer from people depending on their development. At one stage of development, I do whatever I want, and whatever I want is right. And then at the next stage of development, no, it's never okay to cheat. You made a commitment, you have to stick to your word. Right? they asked this question about, is it okay to steal? And the first answer was, yeah, I do whatever I want. The second answer was, no, it's never okay to steal. And the third answer was, well, maybe it's okay to steal. What if your grandmother was dying and you didn't have money for the medicine that you needed to buy her the cure? Well, in this case, it may be very well the ethical thing to do to steal.
What is the impact on people? So I guess, like, on the one hand, there is this whole concept of just the hurt and pain involved, which is immense. Like, we cannot minimize that, we cannot diminish that. Especially if the expectations are, and if the couple is on different pages of what's going on in the relationship. There's probably excuses, like why, like, I know you're saying some people will admit that they did it, but I'm sure it is because X, Y, Z. So it is, but on the other hand, there are other things which are less about the hurt and pain of the betrayal, but also the embarrassment, the ego, all those other things can't come into play.
I think it's become very hard for a lot of people, for individuals, and a commitment is a huge thing. It's a huge thing, and to commit something to the rest of your life, I don't think you know what that means. It's how can you possibly? So you're making a commitment into some kind of uncertainty, which I think some people are more capable of than others. And it does feel like it's becoming less and less tenable.
I guess, you don't know what it means, or what you're walking into, or what you're going to feel like or think like 5 years from. But overall, the institution of marriage, and now it is more about exclusivity in a couple relationship. So the culture tells you that story, that once you're committed, you stay committed, and you make sure that you are doing what you need to do to stay committed. That means resisting temptation. So if we can talk a little bit about what are some of the reasons which you hear in your practice in terms of why people say that they couldn't hold on to, if they admit that they couldn't hold on to that one person exclusivity in a relationship.
Loneliness is a big one. It's a really big one. And people have different ways of approaching that and handling that. Some people choose to have an open relationship or an open marriage, in which case it's no longer a commitment. It still can be a commitment between two people, but then but there's not a lot of structure. There's not a lot of social pressure. That used to be the social pressure was to stay married, but I think that social pressure has been removed slowly over time. And you should if you make a commitment, you should try and make good on it if you can. But sometimes you have to make a decision. Sometimes it's not a good relationship. As a couples therapist, this is tricky because I don't want to be in a position where I'm helping someone stay in a relationship where they're being abused or neglected.
And in terms of a relationship, like, couples need to be on the same page. So it is hard if one person is still committed to the relationship and the other one is not. How do you navigate that for people? There's hurt and pain and anguish involved in all of that.
Yeah, and I think that's the lead, is the hurt and the pain and the anguish, and really listening to that. And as a therapist, I can be there for you, but can your partner be there for that? How much investment do they have in your well-being? That's something that's absolutely needs to be explored, especially in an example like you gave.
And even in terms of, let's say the aggrieved partner, why would you want somebody just doing it out of a sense of duty? Like most relationships, people want to thrive in terms of the attachment and both parties wanting to be with each other in every way. And if that's not there, how do you help people move forward on, like, why would you want to be with someone who doesn't want you?
Why would you want to be with someone who doesn't want you? Well, boy, I think I'd be inclined to start asking questions about the partner that doesn't want you, or that doesn't want to be in the relationship. Because if they don't want to, then they may not feel that sense of being compelled to stay in it. They may feel like it's a duty, it's an obligation. They may feel like it's an unwanted obligation. I wouldn't want to be in a relationship with somebody that felt that way about being in a relationship with me. I think I'd be inclined to want to let them off the hook. And I think a lot of people feel that way. And then the question is how? How do we do that?
Especially if there's children involved and...
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah, other commitments.
Yeah, so a lot of times it's about ethical non-monogamy or ethical splitting up.
What is ethical splitting up?
Well, that's a good question. There's a book that I read when I was in graduate school. We took a course on sexuality. And the book that we had to read was The Ethical Slut was the title of the book, which I thought was a really interesting title because it was really all about communication and respect for people's boundaries. That it's possible to be promiscuous if you're open about it. Maybe if you're open about it, maybe your partner's okay about it. Maybe your partner's okay with it. Maybe they like it. It's not really my job to judge how things should be, but it is my job to kind of open up the doors of communication so that people feel like they can be their authentic selves. And in the end, isn't that really what you committed to in the first place, is to helping one another develop? Sometimes that means the end of a relationship, or a relationship changes because relationships need to change over time.
And how does that start impacting the family structure? The children, let's say the parents have an open relationship and there's young children involved. Does it still provide the stable family structure which people crave for?
That's a good question. And I think maybe more to the question, more to the point of it, how can you do that? Because I can easily imagine different scenarios in the situation that you pitched me, that it could be devastating for the kids. The kids might not know what's coming next. They might not have any idea. Or maybe the kids see exactly what's going on and they just want peace. They just want their parents to be able to get along. And if the boundaries are there, if the kids know what to expect, why the kids don't have expectations the way adults do.
They still expect, or at least the cultural story is that mom and dad are there for them and mom and dad are there for each other. I think it's hard for kids to see that mom and dad are there for them if they're not there for each other. Somehow it's all entangled in their minds.
That's right, and it's all entangled. But sometimes situations evolve that that are unexpected, that are unknown. What if your partner has an accident or an injury or an illness which makes them unable to provide in one way or another? Maybe it's an intimacy. What if someone has something that what's the ethical thing to do? It might be different for one couple to the next.
And I think agreed upon situations are different. I did want to touch on a completely different piece around this, where it is, these are mistakes, like these are one-off excitement somebody has gone into, they're still committed to the marriage, and the other spouse finds out. How do you manage those pieces? Is it like a make it or break it? If it happens once, maybe twice, so.
Well, it depends on what is, and different people have different ideas about what cheating is or what a deal breaker is. I think it's important to be able to delve into some of those things. What was it that was missing? Do you miss the spark that you had when the relationship was young? Are you tired of Bruce? Are you, what's the, what's the situation exactly?
I read this very crushing article about it was more about why men cheat. Well, I think it applies to women too. And it just said that, hey, the crass reasons, I mean, we go into all these emotional depth about, insecurities or, I mean, you mentioned loneliness. I think that's an interesting concept. But it also just said, hey, lots of people will say that, well, I found the other person more attractive, or I was looking for some variety in my physical intimacy, that those seem to be very surface, crass reasons of why people do that. So the emotional piece is not as much there. The emotional connection is still to the family and the mother of the children and the spouse. How do you navigate? I mean, it's crushing for women if they hear that, And also, you had mentioned that the age piece. I guess men feel vital for a longer period of time, and women start to get so busy with child raising and things like that that they probably are deviating less in those years, at least.
Yes, it is tricky, and I think we're kind of getting to the crux of it's about a broken commitment more than it is about anything else. Well, I was lonely, or I was looking for excitement, or this or that. Well, that's fine. You can look for excitement, but I don't know. Maybe skydiving's for you. It's about a broken trust. It's not about excitement or loneliness or any of these other things, because you can be lonely and you can have a conversation with your spouse about that.
So broken trust, like a broken agreement, broken trust is what is going to hurt you more than anything else.
I think so. I think in a lot of cases, I think that's the case.
In terms of just the reality, and I know you spoke about the research too, that considering that there is a fair amount of incidents, whether you call it I don't even know is there a difference between cheating or infidelity or, more than monogamy? I mean, I can see that the broken trust can be the cheating part of it, right? It is just that's something you'd agreed to, and then you can't commit to it, or you haven't even been able to communicate.
Yes, and that has a longer impact on the relationship, because now it's not just you're going on a trip to a grocery store, because now you're taking with you on that trip to the grocery store the broken promises of the past, and now the partner now has to hold that trip to the grocery store. And what are they really doing? Are they really going to the grocery store? And gosh, they've been gone for a long time. And now instead of thinking about if they've got a flat tire or not on the way home, now I'm thinking about, what's really, is something else going on? So instead of being worried about them when it might be prudent, I'm worried about myself.
How do you help couples navigate this right from the beginning in terms of the conversations they have with each other, the promises they make to each other, and the timeline they give themselves to revisit the promises?
That's a good question. And I have to say here, almost always, I wish that couples had come to me earlier.
What do you mean by earlier? Yeah, before it happens?
Well, before the affair, before the trust is so fragile that they can't stand each other anymore. Before they're so hurt that they're no longer capable of rebuilding that trust, because trust is such a hard thing to build. It's so easy to lose. You can lose it in one night, but to build it again will take the rest of your life.
Well, most of them will come to you after. So how do you help them at that point?
Yeah. Well, part of it is rebuilding that trust and discovering, is this relationship, is it even salvageable? And sometimes it is, and sometimes you have to figure out if you even still want it anymore. Is it worth it? Is it even viable? Is it going to cut into your own well-being? or is your own well-being more wrapped up in being able to make to make a commitment? So in a lot of ways, it's an exploration into each person's truth.
What about other factors? Like, people have shared businesses, they have shared homes, they have families, families they are connected to on both sides. How do those factors come into play?
All those things come into play in so many different ways that each situation is truly, unique, and in the especially in the disentanglement. Because people, you've got families, you've got kids, you've got work, you've got all different you've got your telephone plan that you've got on your family plan, and so it's all of these different details. So part of it is a matter of can we create the right amount of separation for us? Can we create the right amount of space between us? Because every couple needs the right amount of space between them.
And how do you deal with the anger issues in all of this which emerge? Let's say you are trying to make it work, but still there's a lot of anger which is going to come out in different ways, even when you're trying to make it work.
Yeah. It's a good question. And sometimes I work with people on just this issue of anger alone, individually. So I know it well, and usually when clients come in, they're surprised at my response to it. I say, well, the problem isn't the anger. The problem sometimes is that you didn't get angry soon enough. It's like, because a lot of times things are, it's not like you go from 0 to 60. It just seems that way. The truth of it is you didn't hear what I said once, and then you didn't hear what I said again. And the third time I'm sounding a little bit more stern, and by the fourth time, or maybe I can't be stern. Maybe I'm just holding it all in. Maybe I'm just biting my tongue and swallowing blood. But at some point, I get to that space where I can no longer control myself. When my anger on a 10-point scale from 1 to 10, when it's an 8 or a 9, now I no longer have the agency that I once had. I heard a comedian talk about this once. He said, the cops said to me, they said, you have the right to remain silent because I was arrested for drunken, disorderly conduct. He said, I had the right to remain silent, but I didn't have the ability.
Yeah, that's how anger works. But but you do bring up a very interesting point in terms of why weren't you angry enough in the first instance. So that brings me back to that question that, sometimes people think it is a one-off. There is a lot of reassurance given. So you kind of try and work with people, even friends and family will say, oh, well, has it happened once? Forget it. You have kids, you have this, so you try and bring everything else, which is like the protective factor to your relationship, because you wanna make it work. These things aren't simple. So the elevation of the anger, of course, the second time, there's also lots of denial. Lots of people don't admit, despite evidence. Lots of people will not admit to it, right? So, how do people even try and get into the right frame of, anger is an emotion, but the right frame of assertion in terms of how to move forward?
Yeah, well, I think that's part of it, is being able to honor your own experience or to honor your partner's experience. And I do that a whole lot in counseling. Is can we look at one another's experience, not as they should be, or as I wish they were to make my life easier. Yeah. The psychologist Francis Vaughan says, allow the breakdown of the stereotypes of how you think life should be. And that absolutely applies to marriage. Can we honor each person's truth about things?
So that is the big question. If this is an ideal, but the ideal isn't playing out the way it needs to be, then how do you honor the experience which both people are having within the cultural context of how people expect you to behave in those matters as well.
Yeah, well, it's you know, and here it comes to, once again, it's a very personal thing between two people. You know, what's right for a fish doesn't work for a monkey. Like, they just can't hold their breath long enough. So you know, and we're all like that. We're all like that to some degree or another. So what's going to work for you? Do you have the honesty with yourself about what you're capable of, about what you want, about what your spouse wants, about what you need? So it takes a lot of honesty, and it takes a lot of integrity to be able to honor what your truth is and what your partner's truth is, because a lot of times we don't even know that we had choices.
And does it also take a lot of acceptance and almost like a suppression of your own vision and desire of, as I said, if people are on the same page, it's a different thing. But if people are on different pages, that becomes very complex too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, and how much space can be made between the ideal and the actual. You know, there's nothing wrong with having ideals. Ideals are great, but it doesn't work so well when you try and fit yourself into an ideal. And it probably works even less well when you try and fit someone else into an ideal. You know, so, but I think there's some good questions that are in there. Like, if your spouse was the ideal version of them, what would that do for you? How would that allow you to feel? Because now, see, in asking that question, now I've opened it up. Now I've opened it up to, what is it that you're really longing for? Because maybe your spouse can find ways of meeting that they're not able to in the kind of fixed way you've got in your mind, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and maybe they can't. So I think it's your navigation of what you want.
Yeah, maybe they can't, but maybe there's some other way that can be met, you know. And I don't know what that means. If that means, joining a bowling league, I'm not sure. But there's different ways of getting your needs met, and I think that's a big thing in relationships, is how do we get both people's needs met?
The other question I have for you is that we all see behaviors as also like a judgment on who you are, what discipline you have. So infidelity has been seen as a character judgment. It all because you've broken a promise, you've veered off from a commitment. Is that something which is taking away from an open conversation? I mean, I will talk to a female counselor as well in terms of just the impacts, but just exploring, because it happens so much, and there's a lot of families get broken up, marriages are broken apart, there's anger, relationships have gone completely haywire, people have been damaged to the extent that they never want to be with anyone ever again. So in the modern context, does it still deserve that same character judgment, which it culturally, traditionally, it has?
I think it is an oversimplification to just look at it as being a cut and dry, and it's an evil thing. I don't think it's quite as cut and dry as that. I think people have their reasons and people have their limitations, and being able to to respect those is certainly important, as is the broken trust. If you've broken somebody's trust, that's a big deal. Mm-hmm. That's a major in a lot of cultures it's considered to be a sin, that you haven't come through on what you said you were going to do, and that coming through can be very meaningful to someone. Mm-hmm. So empathy. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's really so important. And the golden rule is really so important. The golden rule being do unto others as you would have them do unto you. You know, that's so important for a marriage contract. If someone cheated on you, if you're the cheater, I want to know if someone cheated on you.
Or the same spouse. If the same spouse cheated back on you, yeah.
What would that be like for you? How would you trust them moving forward?
Is that something where you see a little bit of a gender difference as well? Like, men feel that, one-offs, I'm stereotyping here, like one-offs here and there don't matter.
I do think so. I think there's a greater taboo for women. And I think it's a greater taboo for women. And I think that's a lot of that is largely biologically based. Why that's an issue, if you're a woman and you get pregnant, you know that you're the mother of the child. The father could be anyone. Only you know who the father is, and maybe you don't even know.
Yeah, if you're indulging in multiple.
So there is an issue of paternity here that I think makes infidelity feel more threatening in some ways for men than it does for women because of the issue of paternity. And because of that, I think that it's evolved, that it's become a greater taboo for women to cheat than it is for men. Is that fair? It's not for me to say. I'm just delivering the message. I'm not. It's just not an ethical, point about how things should be.
But where does the discussion go from here, irrespective of the gender, who is the perpetrator or the first one out, or where does the discussion go from here, considering it has been entrenched in terms of the value of the relationship, the sanctity of the institution of marriage, and we are all seeing the ideal is not being met so very many times. How do we start to ease the pain or move people forward in this?
Sure. And is it something that a couple can recover from? Do they have the will to recover from it? Do they have an orientation that they're able to look at it and go, okay, this isn't just somebody cheating on me. This is somebody that has some kind of an addiction issue. Maybe that's the case. Maybe they've got some kind of an addiction. Maybe there's something wrong with them that causes them to be like this. If it's a mental health issue, okay, is this a mental health issue you can live with or not? Some people can and some people can't. So it's an exploration of your own truth about what you can do and what you can't do, what you're comfortable with and what you're not comfortable with.
And if it is very public, the weaknesses in the relationship are very public, do you still feel that there is even the sanctity of that relationship? I think that we are very other focused too in our cultural environments to see how we are viewed or how we are perceived in those environments. How do people navigate that if they are convinced that they can move forward, but others around them may not think that?
For instance, you think you should stay with your partner, but your mom doesn't think that
or your friends or your
That's a tricky thing. It's a really tricky thing, and if there's a part of me that thinks that I should leave my spouse, then maybe I'll say things to my friends that'll make my friends tell me, oh, Steve, you should not stay with her.
Yeah.
So it can be, it can be really tricky, and we could be deceptive. We can deceive ourselves even.
So I understand the deception part of it, but then I think the question was that if they are trying to make it work, does it have to be more private? I think the tension between when do these discussions become more open, when do people wrestle with them on their own, and of course it's more painful when people are wrestling, but it does protect them from other influences and making a decision entirely on their own.
I'm working with a couple, I've been working with them for some time, and the husband had an affair, and they decided they wanted to work it out. And one of the goals that we've had is being able to talk about it, to be able to be comfortable being able to talk about the affair. That's one of our goals. Can we talk about the affair without it being so triggering? Because if you're comfortable, if both parties can get to a place where you're comfortable enough to talk about it openly, well, that's a great place to be. Because then you've survived it. Then the relationship has survived it.
Have you been able to achieve that with them?
Yes. Yeah, they're doing really well. I'm really happy with the progress that they've made. I'm really proud of them, and they've decided that they've been able to make a commitment to one another. And it's a situation where the frame it fits. The wife is able to look at the situation and go, okay, this is PTSD. Mm-hmm. Part of this is is the trauma that he went through. It had nothing to do with her. It wasn't her fault. See, but she's committed, and she has her own sense of faith, and she's grounded in something, and her groundedness makes them just a wonderful couple to work with, because she knows where her commitment is. She knows what her truth is, and what he ends up doing. She doesn't have to be accountable for his decision. She just has to be accountable for her own, and she gets that. Does that mean she's free from anxiety completely? Not by a long shot. Mm-hmm. But so in some ways the affair has given her more dignity than she had before. Mm-hmm. And she's not getting it from him. She's getting it from another source, not another man, but she's getting it from another source.
But it would be fine if she was getting it from another man too, right? I mean, I think that's where the question is about these reciprocal relationships. Yeah. And like when I hear you, I also hear that, okay, there were deeper issues in terms of the reasons, but if the issues are quite simple, as you know, as I said, like crass, like somebody else was more attractive, I was looking for more fun, I'm still committed to my kids and my family, I'll deny it a little bit, but then, okay, I'll admit it bashfully a little bit. I mean, where does, if the partner is saying, okay, well, that was temporary, that was superficial, the real relationship is here, how do they move forward with that, right?
I think I might be inclined to ask a question if I had a good enough relationship with the person. Like, do you think you're capable of being in a committed relationship? Mm-hmm. And then I think I might ask some probing questions around such a notion. Where is your readiness? Because I know you don't want to enter into a relationship with your partner where she's going to be disappointed. Right? Let's start there from the beginning. Because she probably has been. Because she's expecting you to be faithful to her. And what kind of future? Because I know you care about her. You wouldn't be here if you didn't.
And what about the selfishness aspects of these too? Like, so you could be, what you may consider commitment may be a very selfish desire to say, okay, well, I want my fun, but I also want this secure, nurturing, safe environment to come back to.
So you want to be able to be able to have this thing going on the side without losing the security of the commitment that you're getting from someone else. That sounds like you're maybe a place for you to be getting a little uncomfortable right about now.
How do you challenge that? Or how does...
It's like that. It's just like that.
And how does the spouse effectively challenge that too, right?
Well, sure. And it's a little bit easier for me because I'm not embedded in the situation. I'm not being affected by it in the same way that the spouse is. So it's possible for me to have some playfulness in it. It's possible for me to have less chastisement in it. Like I'm not going to necessarily shame somebody, but I want to really know what's going on. Can we unveil this in a way, and can we forge a future together for the couple where they're going to be able to have a trusting bond? So that kind of goes back to this question, that you had about, like, well, if somebody's cheating in the interim period before they're even married, well, maybe you should trust them to be a cheater.
Yeah.
Maybe you should, yeah, don't expect them to magically become a tortoise like you are, because you're getting married to them. Like, I know you think you're awesome, and maybe you are, but like you might not be able to change a scorpion into a tortoise. And that's one of the really difficult relationship issues that happens in a marriage, is you tell yourself that they're going to be different, and they will be different, but it's not because of your goodness.
Yeah, absolutely. So the question to ask at that time, let's say it's an earlier on question, it's not about why you're cheating and why are you doing this to me? The question is this person the person who needs to do that on an ongoing basis, and is that acceptable to me?
Do they need to cheat, and then what does that mean for my relationship with them? And I think initially people always think of that as a cut and dry kind of situation. Okay, either we're married or we're not. There's only two ways, and it's just as simple as that. But it's not as simple as that. It's not as simple as that. Some people are married, they don't live together. Some people are not married and they live together. Everybody's got their own kind of, some people are in an open relationship, some people are not. So it's a matter of creating the right boundary and space for your particular situation.
And the right agreement which works for you and the other person.
And the right agreement that works for you and the other person, because maybe if you want to go be with other people, okay, that's fine. We're going to be co-parents. We're going to do our best to have a good relationship, but I can't do this. Maybe that's where you're at. I don't know. It's a personal exploration that we can do, and it's helpful to do it within the bounds of a couple, because then everybody feels like they're on the same page, which is where couples want to get back to anyway, because there's often been a departure from that in ways that oftentimes go ignored or unacknowledged until it's too late.
And individuals will go through their own experiences, they'll set up their own boundaries. But as a society, how can we shift the narrative so that it becomes okay for them to be exploring whether it's pain, anguish, sense of betrayal, anger, or the newer version of the relationship that they're trying to move forward to? How does the society start to move towards that?
Oh boy, I love this question. I hate it too, but I love it because it's a sociology question, in a lot of ways, and part of it I think is how do we raise human beings to be in a place where they're more accepting of themselves and each other. I think there's a lot of different ways that can be done, and I think it starts off in parenting. I think it starts off in parenting. And can you be a child-centered educator as a parent, as a teacher? Can we raise people that respect their own feelings enough that they can own them without being shamed because of who they have to be? Because that's what mommy or daddy expects from them. And I became an accountant because that's what I was supposed to do. I really want to be a yoga teacher, but I became an accountant because that's what my mom and dad told me I was supposed to do. Okay, so now not only are they not pursuing their dreams, they're pursuing someone else's dreams, which is even worse because of the resentment that might come with it. So being able to honor one another's truths and our own truths, I think that's where we're going. I think that's where we need to go as individuals and as a collective.
I mean, what about the validity of some of the social norms? Like, obviously, the parents must have thought that the accounting profession was going to pay more or make you more secure, right? That two people in a relationship raising kids loyal to each other is going to create healthier children, happy home, happy society, because those people are contributing to the world in a peaceful, happy way. A happy home is a happy world, kind of a norm. So, I mean, how do you salvage some of that in all of this too?
Yeah, I think in some ways they have to be remade. I think a relationship has to be remade as something that's sacred. Can we spend some time together making the relationship sacred rather than just going on a date to be entertained? Going on this date to be entertained by a movie. Okay, but are you going to be entertained together? Does it lead to a conversation and greater intimacy?
And a connection.
And a connection. I think that opportunity is always there. And I think it's a necessity one for people to have healthy marriages or to have whatever comes, after marriage. Sometimes I've wondered, and I wondered this aloud with a couple recently. I said, well, I almost wonder if you guys wouldn't be better suited to have a short-term marriage. And they said, what? I said, yeah, like what if you're not, they came to me because they weren't sure if they were ready to have a commitment or not. So one of the things I posed to them is, what do you think about having a short-term marriage? Like a marriage of like 2 years or 5 years. Some kind of an interim period where you get to decide if you want to have a full-on whole life commitment. And they were they were a little taken aback by it. But they liked it. They liked it as an idea and as a concept, and it helped them to clarify, no, I want a lifelong thing. That's what they were really wanting. That's what they were really going for. But I think it was helpful to be able to ask that question because they were in that place of not knowing.
And our series actually talked about that, and I had even done an article, Steve, in terms of, take the relationship till it is good and then renew, and also you don't, I think the breakups in marriages, and we weren't just talking about monogamy or infidelity, but if, the relationship isn't working out, it doesn't have to make you enemies. You can still have a very good relationship without the bond of that particular defined relationship of a marriage, right?
That's exactly right, and that's what I'm going for with couples. Absolutely. Whatever the outcome, if you stay married, if you don't stay married, I want you to be able to have a healthy relationship with this person for your good, for their good, for the kids' good. If there are kids involved, that's a huge one. That's a huge one for people. Oftentimes. People that care enough for it anyway.
And that's and if people can keep that goal of connection, respect, irrespective of how the defined relationship goes, it can only benefit them and others around them. On that note, I would like to thank you so much, Steve. It has been a very, very interesting discussion. I wish you good luck in your practice. I believe you're in Ohio right now, so good luck with whatever you're doing, and looking forward to having you back in British Columbia.
I look forward to getting back.
Absolutely, and we'll chat another time as well. Thank you very much. And to our viewers, thanks for watching. We will get a female perspective on this as well, because a lot of women feel they have gone through a lot of anguish. That's the response I got from last time. But thanks for being with us in this conversation, and stay tuned for the next one.